the theory that I had, which there is a denied abortion access to adoption pipeline, and the private entities or private agencies that faith-based organizations back are the biggest in lobbying conservative party members to continue to push the denial of abortion access.
You got the juice now, man.
Yeah. They jump on the mic smooth as well. It's a lyrical sound to the geezer.
Hi, welcome to OK Bluetooth. It started with a byline I saw. It wasn't really a byline. It was just a section inside an organization's spiel. And it was saying that a lot of the adoption recently has decreased simply because of the decrease in teen pregnancies. It started making me think, like, most of the time people who adopt, they want an infant. And then there's a whole topic about why that's its own problem, but the fact stands that that is what the majority of people are going in to adopt. Started to make me wonder if these faith-based organizations had any hand in lobbying for restricted abortion access so that they could essentially have a pipeline of babies coming in. So I set out to find out if this theory held any water. Gathering the public data was the easiest bit. Finding out what the abortion laws are in each state, making a comparative table, counting how many adoption clinics were available in each state, fairly simple enough. But investigating means digging deeper, finding out the truth behind the facts, and uncovering a story. So I had a decision to make. Was I going to chase my theory, whether I proved myself right or wrong? Or was I going to follow the leads until the story revealed itself to me? I, of course, chose the latter because I remember hearing a long time ago from a sculptor that they don't carve out their pieces, they excavate them. So my theory was just that, something to point my nose in the right direction. The whole theory was just the X that marked the spot. What I wanted lie underneath, so I needed to dig. So the idea is that a lot of, well, not that, the theory is that there are going to be more agencies, more institutions willing to be party to adoption in the states where abortion is illegal or hostile. And when I say more, it is in direct comparison to the states where abortion is protected or there's expanded access. So it's like super protected, plus it's part of the state's constitution, so it's like a indelible right for the citizens of that state. I feel like both are going to have adoption agencies, obviously. Adoption is just something that people do, thank goodness. But I feel like there's going to be more of them, more private agencies, more money involved in the states where the abortion is not protected. Kind of like a funneling system. And I just feel like it's in these states where they're like, the person who has to carry the pregnancy doesn't get the right to choose whether they will complete said carrying or not. I feel like in those states, the body is being used more as a vessel. And so the whole adoption pipeline that happens when it comes to giving birth might be a bigger thing in those states. Take, for instance, a harrowing example made out of the nurse Adriana Smith, who passed because of healthcare neglect, but was then kept on life support because of abortion laws. She was 9 weeks pregnant, just past the time when a heartbeat can be detected in the fetus. Georgia's abortion law bans abortion after cardiac activity can be detected in the fetus, with exceptions of medical emergency or rape or incest, only if the fetus is less than 20 weeks developed. It does not make exceptions for ectopic pregnancy, which can be fatal, and the hospital said it did not make exceptions for Adriana's medical emergency either. Maybe because they decided it was not a medical emergency caused by the pregnancy and said pregnancy was still showing up as viable due to the detection of a still developing fetus. She was, although already passed away, made into an incubator. Luckily, she had family and the baby had a present father that is now in custody of his son. However, it chilled me to think that she was just the test. She was the catalyst that the state used to push for how far the law could go by forcing people to have children. And then, if no family is present or willing, it becomes another baby for private adoption or another child shoveled into the system. A system, by the way, that talking heads have said is in trouble because American people are not birthing enough new people to replace existing people exiting the workforce.
About the reality that 1 in 3 Americans are under-babied.
Okay, so these are some limitations to the findings I need to clarify. One, these are the only licensed agencies that I found, and they're presumed private because the nature of public agencies means that they're typically just like through the welfare system. Two, again, these are only the ones I found, so I feel like there might be more that are with or without a license, because I looked up the licensed centers in these states. And the states that I used, it was not every state, but the outlier states that you will see later. Third, some of the agencies repeat because it's the same agency, but with multiple locations in these states. Four, just because I've listed these agencies does not mean they are doing anything unscrupulous or underhanded money-wise. That is not what I'm trying to say. It was just a compilation list to see if I noticed a pattern. It's sheerly about the number, not speaking into the practices of many of these agencies. Okay, we start here. Public adoption costs versus private adoption costs. And for most private places, the fees are covering the prenatal care and the birth expenses, plus legal and attorney and agency fees. Some even offer assistance post-birth with the medical costs, but it's not explicitly offered, but it is so commonly put in the print among many of the agency websites that I visited that they do expect the adopting parents to cover somewhat the medical costs of the birth parent up until the child is born, which is part of my topic for today, by the way. So these are the outlier states that I was mentioning earlier. There's 24 states that were either illegal or expanded access, okay? Within those 24, I took the most outliers of the outliers, all right? So we have the states with the most, that was over 50, and then there's the states with the least, that was under 20. And that you can't see North Dakota and Hawaii, but they both say 8, all right? The states where abortion is legal and the states where abortion has expanded access are in the two columns on your, is that your left? Illegal and expanded access. And I color coded the states that have higher number is in red. The states with the lowest number or the lower number of private agencies is in purple. And states with a moderate number, that 20 to 50 number, is in yellow. And there aren't that many moderate, but there's a hell of a lot with a lower number of private agencies on these two lists than I previously assumed. I didn't know it because I didn't know how expensive it was, but private adoption is so expensive. It seems like it's more about going where the money is, because the states that have it are states known to be where the big bucks can follow. Like Texas just got a Wall Street. Like, so don't sleep on Texas. Texas is where the money is. It always has been. So unlike my initial theory, there doesn't seem to be much of a connection between abortion access and the number of private adoption agencies, except for the fact that perhaps there is, like I said, the connection between the states with higher income, with residents with higher incomes of the states on the outlier list rather than not. So yeah, I think it's more the private agencies where the money is rather than following where the politics are. Because, I mean, for California, Illinois, and New York, they're all under expanded access, but they have some of the highest. Like if we go back, California, Illinois, and New York, they had a lot. Texas, the most, but it is illegal there. One state isn't enough for me to solidify my theory from earlier. All of this, unironically though, does lead us back to the other main topic And whereas economic status, and as it pertains to who is perceived as worthy to getting access to creating a happy home for a child or children. They have to say that. There may be exceptions when we evaluate a case by case. Does not mean you are being paid to place your baby for adoption. We do not buy babies. All expenses are paid by the prospective adoptive parents. It is fraud. Knowingly accepted help. There's no intentions of adoption. There's an author named Gretchen Sisson, or Sisson. It's Sisson, and she talked about basically the financial aspect of adoption. And she was focusing on the fact that a lot of parents, when she talked to about 100 parents that gave their child up for adoption, or as she put it, relinquished their rights to their child for adoption, the whole thing is that financial stability or financial assistance would have changed the trajectory of their lives. These are all people that felt like they didn't actually have any options. They wanted to be a parent, but they felt that it was unfeasible because they didn't have enough financial footing, and they didn't want to have an abortion because, again, they wanted to be a parent. They felt like adoption was the only thing left for them. And it started to make me wonder, and maybe she talks about it in the book, and that's also why I feel like I need to read the book while I do the side research. But the book, I feel like, could be a good part of the research, so I'm hoping the library has it. Like, the difference that it makes, like, there's a financial squeeze on parents who want to keep their child but are in a lower income tax bracket. It really seems like it's about money, and not just about the amount of private agencies that make money, but it's more so the fact that, like the author said, there's a rehousing thing always from poorer tax bracket into houses that fit into a higher income tax bracket. Most of us would say, yeah, what's wrong with that, right? And the normal conversation people have is giving a child a better life. The question that comes up with that argument is that why can't we just provide more resources to people who already have the children? Like, there's one thing to remove someone from abuse, but abuse happens at every financial bracket. It doesn't stop within a tax bracket. Like, it's not a socioeconomic problem. It's a social problem across all economic statuses. Why the constant focus on giving a child to a family with more means, with more money, because it can give them a better life. And the better life includes a lot of the basic things that should be affordable to everyone. Even if you're someone who doesn't believe that certain things should just be provided, it's just the common baseline question that I want to ask going forward for this investigation. Why do we focus so much on removing children from houses without means and placing them into other houses with means? And does it have any correlation to the inception of this country as we know it and its puritanical roots? I feel like this has everything to do with the long history this country has with rehoming children when they think that they're not abiding to the white Anglo-Saxon puritanical ideology. Because it's not just Christianity, it is a certain type of Christianity. I'm wondering if it's all connected together, or if it's just like a stem off of these kinds of things when they used to have those Christian schools that rehome them, or how, the Christian church from its Anglo beginnings started globetrotting around the world telling people that they were going to go to a hell that they had never even heard of, and telling them that because of that they should change their ways because it's a more civilized way to believe, and it just is a form of control. There was a statistic I saw, and hopefully I can find it again and put it up here. They were saying that, the number one people adopting in America historically have been white Christian, married Christian, straight married Christian families, and it's a lot to do with basically the ability of these religious private adoption agencies to refuse people if they want to, until there was a law, and then they had some restrictions like religiously exempt places in 34 states plus DC. They're not allowed to do that, and a lot of the territories, they're not allowed to discriminate according to religious beliefs. 3 states that can, but Alabama and Michigan let religious organizations discriminate for adoption according to religious belief only if they do not receive state funding. Those are the ones that can discriminate. If you receive state funding, you can no longer discriminate, which I think should be the norm. Like, I don't think it makes any sense to take public tax dollar, but then one of those tax-paying citizens, you're allowed to discriminate against them just because of a religious belief. I do feel like there's always lines. Like, if you're a private business, and again, you don't receive state funding, that's completely different because you are a private business. And I feel like, there's a whole set of rules for that as well. But I feel like Utah, ironically enough, the land of the Mormons, they have something that I find interesting. They have to refer the person that they're refusing to a place that will work with them. So I don't know how that's working out, but I do feel like that sounds a bit more fair, where everyone basically, their rights are all getting acknowledged. So the private religious institution doesn't have to go against its private religious morals. Even if they're taking tax dollars, is a little weird to me, because whatever, like, you have no problem taking everyone's money, but you won't provide services. That's a little weird. Whatever, I don't know. We're not going to get into the weeds of that. It's just the whole aspect of how this country was based on Christian reschooling and child abductions, so that you can sell the children to wealthier people, like wealthy people in the market, for basically heirs and assets. They treat children like assets. And I feel like this country treats children like assets, and it's shown in the way they do child stuff. Like, they make it as difficult as possible to be someone without money and means, but also be a parent. And they've even made people think that if you don't have a certain amount of money, you were irresponsible for becoming a parent. And I don't feel like anyone should be attaching parenthood to monetary value. I don't believe that the things that we are saying children need as a collective are things that parents should even be having to stress about paying for, if this is a country that so-called values children being born. Why is it so hard for people to go back to work and have children? Why is it so hard for people to have children and get the proper health care? Why is it so hard for people to fight for their children to be in school all day and then have to fight to get fed? And everyone's like, you need to be able to feed your own children, da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, I could feed my own children, right? But one, I have to go to work to feed my children, right? Meaning I have to be somewhere else all day. So who's going to be at home with the children? A daycare person? Fine. Some daycares, you do have to pay extra for meals. Again, I think it's weird that you would provide a service and say it's mandatory, but then not give all the accoutrement that should come with it. Like, just because you are used to getting got doesn't mean that it's actually right. Like, just because somebody has convinced you that people should be paying their own way if they want to have children, to an extent that is true. However, when it comes to things like meals at school, like serving children breakfast and lunch, I feel like with all the tax dollars people that pay, tax dollars that go into these systems, especially a public school, especially because it's mandatory that you send your child to school or and somehow enroll them in some sort of education. At least it used to be. I don't know what Linda McMahon's going to do going forward. Probably turn everyone into a wrestling pro. These are things that we have to do for children, and why isn't feeding them part of that? Like, we're pretending we're about child health and pretending we're about nutrition, but you don't give people any actual valuable education in these matters. These are all things people have to do on their own, and it pushes people into a place where you think money equals everything, because that's what they want it to look like. Like, at this point, it's money equals everything, just so that they can keep, this is my conspiracy, just so they can keep funneling babies into this system. They just want to make children an asset. They want to make, especially children from families without means, they want to make them basically assets to themselves, to the wealthier population. So either via acquisition, aka adoption and fostering or whatever, I don't know how far that will go, or shoving you into some sort of pipeline. You could have someone who wants to be a parent and would love their child no matter what, but they give up the child because all they can think about is how they don't know if they'll be able to keep a roof over that child's head. And anyone will say, well, yes, then you do what's best for the child, not necessarily for yourself, But part of that is, why do people in general, and now this is people with children or without children, mind you, but why do people have to be so scared about being homeless? Why is it so easy to become homeless in this country? Why is it so easy to starve to death in this country? I know everyone wants to think that there's a personal reason behind it, because then it makes it less scary. It makes it more so something that could never happen to you because you do X, Y, and Z. But any string of unpredictable things could happen. One bad fall at work, and too long in the workers' comp. Somebody like sat there, and they're notorious for someone getting hurt on the job, not through their own fault, and then hires private investigators to follow them around just so that they will not get workers' comp. So you can spend 15 years working for someone. You can spend 15 days working for someone, get hurt, and if they decide that they have enough budget to deny your workers' comp, that's you being homeless. You're homeless now, because apartments aren't held liable in a lot of places. Landlords aren't held liable in a lot of places to understand that they're giving a service for someone. They're playing with someone's livelihood. It's not just business. It's very personal, because someone can end up on the street, especially the way rental records work. You go down this rabbit hole, anybody can become homeless quickly. And we all do all the things we can to prevent it, for sure. But everyone doesn't have all of these fallbacks. Everyone doesn't have people to depend on. Everyone doesn't have the right set of skills to get them into a different place. Like, these are things that, skills, they're cutting Job Corps. One of the things that helped so many people and youth that were maybe aimless, needed something to do, needed something to go to, needed somewhere to live because they're probably in the system, or even if they weren't in the system, they just have a harder life or something, and they want to just do something else, see the world, try to get some skills, get some training, get some education. Job Corps was that thing. They cut Job Corps. So now the children that you so preciously think should be born, they don't even have options in life. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of, like, adoption just being a segue into, it's like neo-colonization, but only for the wealthy. You know what I mean? Like, it's for wealthy Christians. That's the neo-colonization. They want to terraform everybody's life into the way they want it. So they want to make you have the baby because maybe they just like, your genetics or something. I don't know, whatever it is. Or maybe they think it's interesting to have a collection of children again, because it's like an asset, like a collector's memorabilia. So many of these adoption agencies that I've seen so far, the private ones, obviously, not necessarily the state-led adoption, but the private adoption agencies in these states, especially, yeah, they are mainly Christian. In order to tie this all up, I needed to start with actually digging into the claims I'm lobbying around about Puritan Christians. Puritans immigrated to Holland during the early 1600s in order to worship outside of the confines of the English Church, or the Church of England, excuse me. They wanted to be free to worship how they saw fit and thought the Church of England was too hopelessly corrupt. It's important to note here that the Church of England was more than just a church. It was everything in these days. It was the church, it was the government, it was your landlord, it was your mother's mother, it was your father's father, it was the jury, the executioner, it was the supreme ruler of England. That's why Henry VIII made it, essentially, because he wanted more agency and more control, essentially, over his life and his decisions. He did not want to answer to the Pope and the Vatican anymore, especially because he was trying to get this divorce girl. I'm just giving the basis as to why the Puritan Christians might have thought that the church was too corrupt and they couldn't even stay in the country. It's because it was everything, it was their government. Does this sound familiar? So the party that I associate with Puritan Christians and who seems to associate themselves softly with Puritan Christianity ideals is the GOP, or the Republican Party. Um, and they have a lot of puritanical ideas that start with this. And I feel like it comes from that same basis where there's a giant distrust for the government, aka in the Puritans' case, it was the Church of England was the government. And it's just like they want to do what they think is right for them. But I think in America, it started to get convoluted simply because you had a people who felt like they were being oppressed somewhere and they left to go somewhere else and then became the oppressor. But then it gets murkier because you see that the colonies of America were funded by the Church of England and, yes, the Catholic Church. A lot of these American colonies from north to south to Central America, including the islands, the Caribbean islands, they were all funded by these churches, the Church of England, the Pope, the church in Spain. The Catholic Church in Spain was heavily tied to the Vatican, though. They were a heavily Catholic society at this time. So you have this crossover between people who are saying that they can't trust the Church of England, but at the same token, they still want to take the funding in order to set up this safe haven for themselves. It started in Holland and then it actually moved into America after. Just going by the timelines, because the year they moved into Holland, it was, before they settled in America. So anyway, that is where that starts from. So you have this stem of a party of people who recently has, I would say, devolved back into Puritan ideals. Now, there's always the discussion that, the Republican Party used to be the party of the people and Black people used to be Republican because they're the ones that freed the slaves. And that's all fine and good. But just like anything, and just like I'm talking about now, things devolve, things evolve, things change. I thought it was important to note here that the whole switcheroo came around in 1960s. I think during the Civil Rights Act 1964 or the Voting Rights Act 1965. I'm pretty sure it's the Civil Rights Act 1964 that really started the train, and then 1965 really drove it home because in 1964, the incumbent president, Lyndon B. Johnson, introduced the bill for the Civil Rights Act, but the Republican Party's candidate for president, forgot his name, I'll just put it here, he voted against it. And that's when Black people were like, oh, hell no, and voted overwhelmingly, obviously, Democrat, because that was the party with the president that was going to cement rights that people had lost after Reconstruction. So during the Reconstruction period, black people had fought and got all these rights right out of slavery. They were holding government offices, all this kind of stuff. But then it dwindled away in the years after, I think 1870 or something like that. By the time the 1900s came around, they had completely dismantled all the work people had done to get as far as they have. Black people had done to get as far as they have, and started with the whole everything that we know about, the early 20th century as we know it. So when the 60s come around and the president is a Democrat and all the black people are still voting Republican, but the Republican Party president is saying he doesn't want black people to have any rights, and other people who are affected by civil rights, that included women, the disabled, other marginalized groups, it was a red flag. So people started voting Democrat. And I think after that, when the whole Voting Act came in 1965, it really started to cement it, because even though some Democratic Party representatives were still overwhelmingly voting against this stuff, you had the president himself that was supposedly for these things. So people were just siding with the big power in the House. And that's how black people, it is rumored, became overwhelmingly Democratic. And it seems that somewhere down the line, they stopped thinking about what people want and started thinking more about Christian ideals. They have cemented themselves inside the church. So there's not room for the freedom that this country was supposed to be founded upon. That bleeds into when we get into human rights. These are the same human rights that many different people have to fight for, their right to be distinguished as a person, which is also ironic when you think about that, because the Republican Party has always been concerned with being the definer of who gets to be a person. The Republican Party, as we know it, is very obsessed with personhood. This country, honestly, the political parties are very obsessed with personhood when it comes to fitting their agenda. You have them fighting the same thing for abortion, saying that the fetus is a person at conception because this is rooted in their faith. One party of this argument is basing their entire argument on their faith. All of that to say they play a large role in the money-making Ponzi scheme that faith-based organizations have made out of adoption. I am not inherently against adoption. I think it is a great thing. It's a necessary thing. It's something that can bring joy to so many people. Something is going on with these states that restrict abortion so much, but have a lot of laws that are anti-child friendly. And then we get into the main point that people like to make now, where it is always, if you can't afford the baby, then don't have the baby. Can't feed your baby, then don't have the baby. And don't think maybe if you can't feed your baby. However, I would like to pose this question, right? And I wrote it down so that I wouldn't mince my words. What if the question isn't, what could this child be if they could have access to resources, but instead, how can we make sure society as a whole has equitable access to the proper resources to sustain its population? How has something that happens to so many people become just another meritocracy game? Why should the first thing you think about when you think of children be money? Because being a parent takes more than financial wealth. But society has tied almost everything to financial wealth. The ability to have ample time to spend with children, getting access to challenging and safe schooling, being able to provide a stable housing situation, including providing regular meals, accessing necessary healthcare to prevent diseases and treat children. All things people want to be able to afford out of pocket. And honestly, they are basic things that should be affordable and accessible to all if you are running a country that you want to see grow and sustain itself. Instead, the idea seems to be to curate a society around a certain exclusionary ideal and make it as hard as possible to live like a normal person if you do not subscribe to said ideals. And this includes controlling who gets the option to raise children. I would also like to add that one of the main things that people talk about when they're bringing up child welfare is the studies that have shown that children that come from lower social economic status families, and I'm just going to shorten that to SES, social economic status, are 3 times as likely to um, get abused than children that come from a higher social economic status family. And the studies in themselves also put the limitations on it that one, a lot of the stressors come from financial stress. Family stress is a big part as to why the abuse occurs. And the largest uh, category of abuse is child neglect. I would also like to add another obvious limitation that I felt was not spoken about when I was reading some of the studies that talk about this. I'm not negating the studies. The studies are the studies. They found it is 3 times higher, and I mean it's there. But I did have to wonder if anyone was taking into account that um the whole limitation around access to participation in this studies. So it's like it was observation and it was from child welfare service kind of situations where they're pulling these numbers from. And there's the obvious part, I keep saying obvious, but there is the part where you have to understand that children from families of a lower SES family or of a lower SES, they are more monitored. They're more heavily monitored. There's just more instances where they're going to come into contact with child welfare professionals than someone in a higher social economic status. Those kinds of instances in where the family of the child of someone in a higher economic status, social economic status family is these are things are reported maybe by an older child or a close adult or a family friend or a teacher that's noticing something. Like these are things that are reported, but also there is more of a stigma, especially in this country. I don't know how other countries work, but in America, there is a lot more hesitation to do anything legal against somebody with money just because they have the money to fight it and you obviously don't. Like most of the times you either doing the reporting or observing, you don't have money to fight this higher economic status family. And now that's not even to say like the 1% or anything like that. Those kinds of things matter when you're talking about who is part of this study and how they got there. And like I said, people in lower social and economic status families are often just more heavily monitored. Back to the original point, the main cause for the abuse was financial stress. And it's not inherently because the people are bad, but because life has taken them into a bad situation and they don't have the resources or the tools to properly mentally emotionally deal with these things, and it's a generational thing. That's one thing, and I'm not excusing child abuse. I am just saying that when you think about why it happens and how it's not always going to be preventable because some people are just evil, but I have a hard time not realizing that a lot of people are ascribing the evil to the person after they hear their economic status. It's as if nobody with a family that comes from money, nobody's ever been abused. Like you're automatically going to have a better life just because the family has money. Like these are the things people make sound like it's normal. Like as long as your family has money, you as the child will be okay. And that's just not the case. But that is the prevailing statement that happens when you think about adoption. It's always somebody coming in to take a child, not even like just a regular child from the place. They were either abandoned or something like that. These are some cases, but there's so many. The amount of turnover that adoption agencies have said themselves, the amount of turnover, like the fact that these people reach out to these agencies constantly looking for newborn children, and they're always thinking that they need to go get it from someone who's disadvantaged, and the disadvantage is always economic.
They jump on the mic smooth as well. It's a lyrical sound to the geezer.
This actually isn't over because I feel like I've just scratched the surface on what I want to figure out about all of this. And so the next step I'd like to take is actually speaking to people who have participated in adoption, either as the birth parent or as the adopting parent. And I'd like to hear about how you viewed parenthood prior to adoption and after adoption, and your finances, how you viewed finances as they pertain to parenthood, and how you were treated in the process of adoption, how you decided what agency to use or who to choose. So, if you would like to participate in that, I know it's very personal. I will also keep things anonymous. I have my Instagram here. You can DM me on Instagram if you don't have Instagram. I wish YouTube never took away its messaging platform. I will leave this email for any anonymous, or if somebody wants to actually talk. If you want your face to be shown, we can arrange that as well. If you don't want, like I said, if you don't want your face to be shown, but you want your voice, and maybe I can work on changing your voice, let me know. We'll figure out. If you want to be anonymous in a way, we will make it happen, just so you can tell your story and help me really understand some of this. Okay, thanks for watching, you guys. Thanks for watching this first part of the investigation. I didn't mean for it to be multiple parts, but I just feel like this is my first time doing something like this, and as it unfolds, I'm just finding that it feels like I need to just keep going with it. And so that's what I'm going to do. So I hope you enjoyed this style of video. I'm looking to do it more, obviously, to finish this investigation, or whatever finished means. Hopefully I get some feedback from either birth parents or adoptive parents about the adoption process and those questions that I asked. Let me know. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up so that the channel has some support and I can continue going forward with my journalist dreams. Okay? Thanks for watching again. I appreciate your time that you spent here. Bye-bye.
You got the juice now, man.
Yeah. They jump on the mic smooth as well. It's a lyrical sound to the geezer.